Geneva Tweeten, and I'm married to Morris Tweeten. We've been married for 62 years, and we had 5 children. We have 4 left. One daughter died from cancer. And then I now have 10 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. So I have a wonderful family.
You do?
Yes. Very happy with it. And some years ago, as I was watching my children grow, I became interested in our ancestors because I wanted to know if maybe some of my children had inherited traits from our ancestors. So about, it's at least 25, 30 years ago, at least 30 years ago, I started looking into this. And it worked because I made Norwegian dolls, and then when the grandchildren would come, they'd say, "Which grandma is this?" Because I put bunads on them.
Sure.
And so then, of course, I could tell them stories.
Sure.
And I would have artifacts throughout the house. And it was kind of fun. I had a butter press, and I had it setting on the table in the living room. Nobody paid any attention to it. Then one day I thought, I'm hanging this on the wall. Lo and behold, I had no more than hung it on the wall. And here a granddaughter comes in and says, "What is this, Grandma?" See, so it was in the wrong place at that time, but hung it on the wall, it'd be okay. It was the same way with my Lexo stick that my dad had made. I had that hanging on the wall, and the little grandson, he thought that was a sword. So then, of course, there's a story behind that. So all these little things were stories. It's just like the butter press. You could tell the story of how, you know, they used butter to pay taxes. And the same way with when their grandfather lived in North Dakota, why he would churn butter and bring it to the store and get groceries for it.
Yeah.
So see, all these things are stories. They're wonderful. And so I'm happy about having them learn their heritage. So it was a good thing to do.
So you have wonderful Bibles here.
Yes.
How old would you say they are?
Well, anywhere from 150 to over 200 years old.
Oh my.
Yes.
Oh my.
They are possibly my best treasures, I think. Because through this, you think about the time they came, and then you think about how difficult times were. And then I have their Bible.
Yeah.
And they came in search of a new home, and so when I look at these, it tells me that it was successful. They stayed, they had families, and we're down to the 8th generation.
Oh.
So see, they were great, and so for that reason they're precious.
Precious,
Some of the most precious things I own. This particular Bible is like 143 years old, and it came with Gunder tree on it. This was his, and he was my great-grandfather.
Okay.
And so it was Gunder's Bible that came, and it was handed down to me. And then you see, we know it because inside here, he has written the names of his children as they were born. And so that's how we know. And then he tells that when he was born, and then when his wife was born, and then when their sons were born.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so we know that is his Bible, and that's my great-grandfather. Then I have this one, and this is my great-great-grandfather's Bible. And he came with his family. He was just a little boy when he came, and they came through Canada.
Oh.
And so, and this Bible then is like, about 190 years old. And there too, see, the names of his children have been written in there. I had the whole thing, but I've been using this when I have gone to speak at different places to show that the importance of objects, you know. And so there's apparently one page that is missing, but I am so glad that what I have done is written it down
Oh, okay.
on this piece of paper. I have translated it, so it was in there, you know, so the whole family
Sure.
was in there. And they came through Canada and settled in Riceford, Minnesota.
Okay.
And it's interesting because when he came and settled there, his granddaughter told me that he killed up to 7 rattlesnakes a day. He had absolutely no fear of rattlesnakes. And then my grandfather lived there, and my uncle as well. And so then my grandfather, he always had chickens. And so that would let him know when the rattlesnake was there. And then my uncle, he would just stomp them. He'd take his shoe and just stomp them. So they all had different ways of dealing with the rattlesnakes. But of course there aren't that many rattlesnakes there now as it was when they came. Because then of course it was frontiers, you know.
Sure.
And so isn't that something? It's really, really interesting stories that you can hear.
So they came to this region in the 1870s, 60s?
Yeah, it'd be right in the 1870s and 18.
Okay.
I don't have Bibles from the other families that I have that came. They all came from Norway.
Okay.
And they were all here. Well, my family, the Burke ones, were all here before Ellis Island.
Yes, yeah.
See, they didn't even come through Ellis Island. So they came through Castle Gardens.
These two are the other side of the family.
Yes, this is the Tweeten side of the family.
Side. Okay.
Yes. And this book, Bible here, is one that belonged to Ole Knudsen Flaten. Now, Ole Knudsen Flaten was a young man that came to, first of all, his uncle came in 1860. Ole Knudsen Flaten came in 1860. He was here a couple of years and then he joined the 15th Wisconsin Regiment under Colonel Haig. So he wrote a book, and I guess I left my book up at the Legion because I have a display up there about the Civil War, being it's the 150th anniversary. I just felt it was important that we do something to show tribute to that. Anyway, he was in the Civil War. He wrote this book, and it's very interesting. And he tells us about how he was in this battle at Stony Creek in Tennessee. And he said, I was shot in the breast. So he was shot in the breast, and it happened to be that that particular battle, why then, the Confederates won. So the Confederates were gathering up all their prisoners. They took one look at Ole and said, he's going to be dead in 2 days, just leave him. Well, Ole says in the book, I'm hulling, you know. And so he said, it took me 3 days, but I made it back to Colonel Haig's regiment. Colonel Haig said I was more dead than alive, but I'm alive. And so he came back to Mabel, Minnesota, and started the Mabel Lumberyard there. And his son had the lumberyard for over 50 years. They had the hardware store there, and he had a hardware store in Fountain. So this young man was true blood Norwegian, because he was hulling, he said. And so that was his Bible. And it says that he purchased this in 1879. So he purchased the Bible, he did. But it has his name in it, and we bought it at an auction. At a family auction, so we have that. And then our very precious, precious Bible is one that belonged to Morris's great-grandfather. And it has its own special story to tell. Because one day Morris's sister came with that book, or just the cover of the book. This is Ole Tweeten. And this is his Bible. Anyway, she came with this and she said, I believe it says Tweeten on here. And I took the cover and I said, yes, it says Torbjörn Larsen Tweiten, Hallingdal, Norge. We had no idea where Morris's family came from.
Oh.
So through this cover, what I did was to send letters. Well, first of all, I got the map, and I looked for Hitterdal on the map. So I sent letters there. But I got one letter back, and that said that, no, there has never been a Tweeten in this area. So then a couple of years passed. And I was sitting down at La Crosse University waiting for my turn to get in and do some genealogy work. And this lady sitting next to me, I told her my story, and sitting next to me she said, well, why don't you try Hedal? Because Hedal was once called Hitterdal. This I did. So I wrote to the Hedal State Church, got a letter back saying, yes, Tweetens had always belonged there and continue to belong there. So that is how important this Bible is. And it was a Bible that came with Ole Tweeten when he was 24 years old. He was 24 years old. He came in 1849.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And then he came and he settled in Highlandville.
Okay. In 49.
He purchased the land in 52, I think.
52. Okay.
I believe that's the date.
Yeah.
So this is very precious to us.
Yes.
It was Ole then, Morris's grandfather, that brought it with from Norway. Then it was handed down to Morris's dad. And Morris remembers his dad reading from it.
Okay.
And now it's been handed down to Morris. So it is Morris's Bible now. And it's, of course, Norwegian. It's had, you can tell that it was
used.
yes, it was. Their faith was very important to them. So.
Definitely. Oh, fun. And this is he.
That's Ole, yes. That's Ole Tweeten. I have hymnals here too. Now, that was important because when you were confirmed, you were always given a hymnal. And I have here my grandfather, Amund Bergman's hymnal. And he was born in 1878. And he has his name in there. Then when he was older, after his first wife died, he married a second lady, Anna Binge, and I see she has her name in here, Mrs. Amund Bergman, and there's been some erasing. So she must have erased something and put Mrs. Amund Bergman.
Lest we should be confused.
And then this is my father's. Yeah, this is my father's. And it has Ben Bergman's name in the back. So it apparently was a hymnal that was passed down to him. Because Ben Bergman's address is different than what my dad's was.
Okay.
My dad's address was number 3, route number 3, his was number 1. So this is my dad's hymnal. And then I have my mother's, that she was given for her confirmation. And see, they were confirmed in Norwegian.
Sure.
So they're all Norwegian. But they are precious. They are beautiful. Ella Oneida Triana. And then this one is mine, that I received from Grandma Anna when I was confirmed.
Just a couple of years ago.
Yes, just a few years ago. Yes. And then, I don't know, somewhere along the line, I guess, you know, they changed hymnals, and so then maybe the tradition was not continued.
You talk about some of them putting their children in. Did they go more than one generation?
No.
Of things, okay.
No, it's just the one generation.
Okay.
It's their children.
Sure.
And their wives' names.
Okay.
Because in this one, he has the name of his wife, and they say that Åre, Født Åre, well, oh, it's back here. You know, they just say that Åre 1865. Bleande Dog. This one's hard to read.
Yeah, that's okay. That's good.
It's kind of...
For a number of families that we've spoken with over the years, this was the book they knew for sure would be handed down.
yes.
And so the records, whether they were written in the lining or on the cardstock or whatever it was, or were just extra papers put in, because this was the book that we knew
Yes.
was going to be
Yeah,
cherished.
this tells the story, how
Sure.
it gets handed down. And there could have been, see, there are pages missing. So there could very well have been that they did that.
Sure.
But it's just that because it's so old and it's been through a lot, really, because Ole would have been the one that came first, one of the first to come to Iowa, you know, in 1849.
Yeah.
And then Morris's dad homesteaded in North Dakota, so the Bible went with him to North Dakota in 1904.
Uh-huh. And then did he come back then to this area?
No,
No, he stayed there.
they came back for a couple of years, but then they went back, and that's where Morris, my husband, lived his growing up years
Okay.
until he was 15 years old. Then his father, well, he went blind, and so Morris was not old enough to take over the homestead, and so they came down here.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But it's wonderful to hear
Yeah.
the stories Morris has to tell,
Sure.
because he lived through the Dust Bowl,
Yeah.
and he lived through the, they're not called grass,
Locust.
the locusts,
Locust, yeah. Yeah.
and he worked in a mine. He worked in a mine when he was 13 years old, underground.
Oh.
And it was so interesting when we were there. We went through their museum, and he showed me the gold carts that they filled with coal,
Sure.
you know, and then they would be pulled out of the mines with mules. And so he was 13 years old, and he was pitching coal into those, I don't know what the name of those
Sure.
boxes
Boxes
are.
were, yeah.
But
Did you say what this was near? In which part of North Dakota was that?
it's near Hettinger,
Okay.
yes. But he was born in Bucyrus. That's where the homestead is. Morris's dad homesteaded then, and he had built this house. And the neighbors told us that all of a sudden he disappeared, and they couldn't imagine what happened to that man. But come to find out, he brought a bride back with him.
Oh.
So he had come back here for a bride.
For a bride. Oh, there's the romantic.
There it is.
How much of a challenge was the language? I know you speak and read Norwegian, but maybe not as much as you're comfortable reading and speaking.
It took me a little while.
Sure. Did you know Norwegian before you started doing genealogy?
Oh yes,
Okay.
I spoke. You know, that was the only language we had in my home as a child.
Sure.
And so, yes. This is another thing that's quite interesting, and that is that when I was in Norway, they told me that I had what they thought was sogning. And then my sister, that speaks Norwegian, they said she was Gudbrandsdal. How could it be different? But apparently it is.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was in Norway, we were interviewed by a paper, and I said to him, you know, when he started talking, I said, "Can you understand my Spring Grove Norwegian?" And he said, "What do you mean, Spring Grove Norwegian?" And so I said, "Well, to Spring Grove, they came from all over Norway, and we just threw it all in a kettle, and out came Spring Grove Norwegian." So then he put that in the paper. Oh, I thought that was the best definition I could give, because I knew it wasn't fluent in one dialect or another.
Sure.
But no, I got along very well in Norway. They at the on the radio, Emma.
Yeah.
Okay, so I say "ha det bra," and Emma says "ha det gott." So different. It was interesting too that I was over at my friend's house, and she came and she said, "I just found this in my mother's things," and it was a catechism. and it was in Norwegian. And she didn't know what it was. And then she said, and now this is my book. When I was reading for the minister, that's what we called it.
Yeah.
And she said, she showed me that too then. And then I said, yes, but look, they're the same thing. Only this one's Norwegian and this one's in English. But they said the same thing.
Sure.
The words were the same, you know. So it's very interesting that I have spoken at all the churches in the area, like Houston and Cheyenne, Mabel, and Highland and Spring Grove. I have spoken at schools, Norskadalen, and a banquet in La Crosse, and at a literary guild, and that was nerve-wracking. And I had, of course, I had that conversational Norwegian for 15 years.
Yeah.
I could hardly believe that, but I've got pictures to show that we started way back then, thanks to Lee Brook, and of course,
Absolutely.
he's the one that takes all the pictures. And so I think I have tried to encourage the community to remember. Well, I have certainly encouraged their heritage.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope I've done my work well. This is our family Bible that is 208 years old. It's a Bible of Ole Tweeten, Morris's grandfather. The Bible was given to Morris by his father, and Ole emigrated in 1849 as a young man of 24 years old. The Bible given him when he left home in 1843. Ole Knudsen Flaten, and it's 136 years old. He emigrated in 1860, enlisted in the Civil War in 1862. He started the lumberyard in Mabel and wrote a book of his life in Norway and the Civil War. He was soon wounded at Stony Creek. He was shot in the breast and left to die by the Confederates. But he made it back to his regiment, Colonel Haig of the 15th Wisconsin. Is like 190 years old. And it belonged to my great-great-grandfather, Ole Gunder Triangen. Came to Canada. He arrived there on June 1st of 1867 with his wife, Brunnig, and 4 children. And we know that it's his Bible because he has written in the Bible the names of his, when he was born, when his wife was born, and his children. Belonged to my great-grandpa, Gunder Triangen. We know it is his Bible because he has written, it's in the back of this Bible where he has written on them. He has written his family that as they were born, he would fill it into the family Bible. When he was born, his wife and his children. But he has only listed his sons, not his daughters. He had 2 sisters and 1 brother when they emigrated. And they came to the Riceford area and settled there.